He had an affair with my mom and now she's carrying his baby. I thought my life was perfect. At 28, I had a loving fiancé, Luke, who seemed like everything I ever dreamed of, kind, attentive, and deeply in love with me. We were inseparable, planning a beautiful future together, a wedding that felt like it would be straight out of a fairy tale. I could already picture us growing old, raising children, and cherishing every moment life had to offer. My relationship with my mother, Diane, was just as idyllic. She was my confidant, my biggest cheerleader, and my anchor in every storm. After my dad passed away when I was young, Mom stepped into every role: father, mother, and best friend. Despite her own grief, she made sure I never felt the weight of our loss. She always told me, "You deserve to be loved fully in every way." And I believed her. The three of us, Luke, Mom, and I, shared an easy camaraderie. Luke admired my mom, often complimenting her strength and warmth, which only made me love him more. Mom, on the other hand, adored him, often saying, "You've chosen well. He's a keeper." I felt blessed to have these two pillars in my life, two people who seemed to love me unconditionally. As wedding plans took shape, the house buzzed with excitement. Mom and I spent hours poring over dress designs, floral arrangements, and guest lists. Luke often joined in, humorously pretending to have opinions about color schemes, only to agree with whatever I or Mom decided. Life felt like a dream. But dreams have a way of shattering. Looking back, there were moments, tiny, fleeting things, that didn't seem important at the time but now stick out like glaring warning signs. Like the way Luke's eyes lingered on Mom a little longer than they should have during a family dinner, or how their conversations seemed a bit too comfortable. There were times I'd catch a private joke shared between them, their laughter echoing in a way that left me feeling slightly out of place. But I brushed it off. Why wouldn't they get along? After all, they were the two people who loved me the most. One evening, as we all sat in the living room, Luke and Mom laughed over a story from their latest errand. I remember feeling a strange pang of jealousy, not the romantic kind, of course, but a childlike insecurity. Was Mom stealing a part of Luke's affection? Felt silly even to think that. Still, something about their dynamic had begun to shift and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Despite these small moments of unease, I buried my doubts. I was too focused on the wedding, too eager to believe in the happiness I thought I had secured. After all, I'd always been the type to trust the people I loved, to believe that they'd never hurt me. But trust can be a dangerous thing. One Saturday afternoon, Luke suggested we invite Mom to a wedding vendor appointment. "She has such great taste," he said, flashing that charming smile of his. "It'll be fun to get her input." His enthusiasm seemed genuine and I agreed, thankful for the bond they shared. Little did I know that this seemingly innocent suggestion was another piece of a much larger puzzle, one I wasn't yet ready to see. In hindsight, I realize how oblivious I was to the signs. The stolen glances, the casual touches, the secret smiles. They were all there, hidden in plain sight. But I had no reason to question them. Why would I? Mom was my rock and Luke was my forever. What possible reason could I have to doubt them? The days rolled by and life continued its harmonious rhythm. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, just as it always had. Mom often stayed late after dinner, chatting with Luke and me about everything from wedding details to memories of my childhood. She had this way of making every conversation feel like a warm hug, a safe place. I still remember the night I went to bed early, leaving Mom and Luke to clean up after dinner. As I lay there, I could hear their voices carrying faintly through the walls, their laughter soft but persistent. It didn't strike me as odd at the time. I simply smiled, grateful for the love that surrounded me. But somewhere deep down, a tiny voice whispered, a voice I chose to ignore. It hinted that maybe, just maybe, the laughter wasn't meant for my ears. That perhaps there was a part of their connection I couldn't understand. I silenced that voice, convincing myself it was paranoia, a cruel trick of my imagination. How could I question them? Luke was my future and Mom was my past and present. They were the foundation of my life, the two people I trusted implicitly. To doubt them felt like doubting the very fabric of my world. Little did I know that fabric was already fraying one thread at a time. The cracks in my perfect life were there, waiting to shatter everything I believed in. It wouldn't be long before I stumbled across the first thread of betrayal, a thread that would unravel my entire world. The whispers of unease that had begun in the back of my mind started to grow louder one evening. It was nothing significant, nothing glaring, but a string of small, almost imperceptible things. That night, as I cleared the dinner table while Luke and Mom chatted in the living room, I caught a fragment of their conversation. A mention of a time they'd been together that I didn't recall. "You're lucky we pulled that off without her noticing," Mom said, her voice tinged with a laugh. Luke chuckled in response. "Yeah, good thing we're smooth, huh?" My hands froze mid-motion, the clinking of plates suddenly deafening in the quiet kitchen. What were they talking about? What had they done together that I hadn't noticed? For a moment I stood there, unsure if I should ask, but I decided against it. It was probably something mundane. A surprise for me, maybe related to the wedding. Still, the seed of doubt was planted. The following week I started to notice things I had brushed aside before. Luke seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone. I assumed it was work, but when I walked past him on the couch one evening, I caught a glimpse of a message thread quickly minimized. The name at the top of the screen made my stomach twist. Mom. It was innocent, right? Why wouldn't they text? They were close, after all, and with all the wedding planning, it made sense for them to communicate. But then why had he hidden the screen so quickly? The doubt gnawed at me, and for the first time, I felt a strange discomfort about their connection. That night, as we lay in bed, I mustered the courage to ask. "You and Mom seem to be talking a lot lately," I said, my tone light, hoping he wouldn't sense the anxiety bubbling underneath. "What's that about?" Luke turned to me, his expression unreadable for a split second before he smiled. "She's just been helping me with some wedding stuff. You know how she loves this kind of thing." His answer made sense. Of course it did. But the feeling in my gut didn't go away. The next day I decided to confide in my best friend, Megan. Over coffee I spilled everything. The odd conversations, the hidden texts, and my growing unease. "Do you think I'm being paranoid?" I asked, nervously stirring my cup. Megan frowned, her gaze thoughtful. "I don't think you're paranoid, but I also don't think you should jump to conclusions. Maybe just keep an eye on things." Her advice was simple but logical, and it gave me a sense of direction. I wasn't ready to accuse anyone of anything. I had no proof, just a feeling. But the thought of quietly observing filled me with a mix of dread and determination. That evening I noticed something else. Luke had always been attentive, but lately his affection felt calculated. He'd go out of his way to kiss me on the forehead, hold my hand, or compliment me, but it felt like he was trying too hard, as if he was compensating for something. Meanwhile, Mom was acting strangely too. She'd become more distant, excusing herself earlier than usual after dinner or avoiding our usual weekend outings. When I asked her if something was wrong, she brushed it off with a wave of her hand. "Just tired, sweetheart. Getting old, you know." But that wasn't Mom. She was vibrant, always full of energy. Tired didn't suit her, and it only added to my growing suspicions. Then one evening I made a mistake. Or at least that's how it felt at the time. I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly, where Luke and Mom were standing too close together. Their conversation halted the moment they noticed me, and their expressions shifted into forced casualness. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to sound neutral but failing to mask the edge in my voice. "Just talking about the caterer," Mom said quickly, her voice higher than usual. Luke nodded, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, nothing big. How was your call with the florist?" The deflection was so obvious it stung, but I played along, retreating to the living room with a fake smile. My heart raced as I sat there, pretending to scroll through my phone. Something was definitely going on, and it wasn't just about the wedding. That night, as I lay in bed beside Luke, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every odd moment, every suspicious glance, every too perfect excuse. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I made a decision. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, while Luke was in the shower, I picked up his phone. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. He'd always trusted me with his passcode, a gesture that suddenly felt ironic. I opened the messages, scrolling to the thread with Mom. What I found wasn't explicit, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you." The words burned into my mind, and before I could process them, I heard the water shut off. Panicking, I locked the phone and placed it back where I'd found it. My world was beginning to crack, but this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. My hands were still shaking as I moved away from Luke's phone, my mind racing. The message was vague enough to leave room for interpretation, but my gut told me otherwise. It wasn't some random misunderstanding. There was something going on between Luke and my mother. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. That day I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept circling back to the message. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Was it about the wedding? Something else? Oh. Deep down I knew the truth. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed proof. The following evening I waited for Luke to fall asleep. My heart was pounding as I unlocked his phone again, scrolling further into the message thread. The words I read shattered what little hope I'd been clinging to. Mom, we can't keep doing this. She'll find out. Luke, I'll handle it. She doesn't suspect anything. Mom, I feel so guilty but I can't stop myself. It's wrong, Luke. Luke, I don't care if it's wrong. I love you. I stopped reading, my vision blurring with tears. My breath came in shallow gasps, my chest tightening as though the walls were closing in. My fiancé, the man I was planning to marry, was in love with my mother. I locked the phone and placed it back on the nightstand, quietly slipping out of bed. My feet carried me to the living room where I collapsed onto the couch. My mind raced through every moment of the past few months, every laugh they'd shared, every lingering glance I'd dismissed. It all made sense now. The betrayal wasn't just imagined, it was real, and it cut deeper than I ever thought possible. The next morning I decided to confront Luke. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. As he sat at the kitchen table sipping his coffee, I stood across from him, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. Luke, I began, my voice trembling, is there something you want to tell me? He looked up, his face unreadable. What do you mean? Don't play dumb, I snapped, my anger boiling over. I saw the messages. Between you and my mom. His eyes widened and for a moment he looked genuinely panicked. But then he composed himself, setting the mug down carefully. It's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh, tears threatening to spill over. Really? Because it looks like you're in love with my mother. Care to explain how that's not what I think? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. You didn't mean for it to happen? My voice rose, the disbelief and hurt bubbling to the surface. You didn't mean to betray me with my own mother? Are you even listening to yourself? I love you too, he said, his voice almost pleading. I'm just confused. I don't know how it happened, but it's not like I planned this. Please let me explain. I shook my head, unable to process his excuses. There's nothing to explain, Luke. You destroyed everything. You didn't just cheat. You broke every piece of trust one had in you, in us. I couldn't bear to hear any more. Grabbing my keys, I stormed out of the house. My first instinct was to call Mom, to confront her too, but I couldn't do it over the phone. Instead, I drove straight to her house. When she opened the door, her face fell the moment she saw me. He knew. We need to talk, I said, my voice cold. Sweetheart. Don't, I interrupted, stepping inside. Don't call me that. Don't act like everything is okay when it's not. You slept with Luke. You're in love with him, aren't you? Mom's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I thought she might deny it. But instead she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? The words felt like acid in my mouth. That's exactly what he said. Do you two rehearse your lies together? Or is that just your go-to excuse for ruining my life? She reached out to me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said, my voice breaking. I trusted you. You were my mother. You were supposed to protect me, not this. I'm so sorry, she said, her tears streaming down her face. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen. But it did, I said, my voice hollow. And now I have to live with the fact that the two people I loved most in the world betrayed me in the worst possible way. I turned to leave, but before I could, she spoke again, her words stopping me in my tracks. There's something else, she said, her voice trembling. I'm pregnant. I froze, the weight of her words crashing over me like a tidal wave. Pregnant. My mother was carrying my fiancé's child. It was in that moment that I realized my life would never, ever be the same. The room seemed to tilt as her words sank in. Pregnant. My mother was pregnant, with Luke's child. My legs felt weak and I gripped the edge of the doorway to steady myself. For a moment, the world around me blurred into a haze of disbelief and pain. You're pregnant. I finally whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of the revelation. Mom nodded, tears streaming down her face. I found out last week. I didn't know how to tell you. How to tell me? My voice rose, anger breaking through the shock. How about you start with why? Why would you do this to me? Why would you ruin my life like this? I didn't mean for any of this to happen, she said, her voice trembling. It just happened. Stop saying that. I yelled, my hands trembling. You didn't mean for this to happen? What does that even mean, Mom? You don't just accidentally fall in love with your daughter's fiancé, and you definitely don't accidentally get pregnant by him. Her face crumpled as she tried to explain. I was lonely and he was there. We connected in a way I never expected. It was wrong, I know that, but I couldn't stop myself. I let out a bitter laugh, tears streaming down my face. Lonely? That's your excuse? I lost Dad too, but I didn't destroy someone else's life to fill the void. And Luke, he was supposed to be my partner, my future. How could you do this to me? I hate myself for it, she whispered. Every day I hate myself for hurting you. But the baby, it's here now. I can't undo that. Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Not only had they betrayed me, but now there was a permanent reminder of their betrayal. A child that would forever tie them together. I can't do this, I said, my voice breaking. I can't even look at you right now. I turned and left the house, slamming the door behind me. The cold air outside hit me like a slap, but it did nothing to clear the storm raging in my mind. I stumbled to my car and sat there for a long time, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I sobbed. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. It was a text from Luke. Can we talk? Please don't shut me out. Shut him out. How could he even ask that? He had destroyed my entire world and now he wanted a chance to explain? My anger boiled over and I grabbed the phone, dialing his number. He answered on the first ring. Hello, he said, his voice hesitant. Talk? I snapped. You want to talk, Luke? Fine. Let's talk about how you not only cheated on me but did it with my mother. Let's talk about how she's now pregnant with your child. What exactly is there to talk about? There was a long pause on the other end before he spoke. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp. Don't you dare say you love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have thrown away everything we had for her. It wasn't like that, he said, his voice desperate. It wasn't planned. We didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. I'm so sorry, but You love her, I finished for him, my voice cold. Silence. That was all the answer I needed. I ended the call and threw the phone onto the passenger seat, my chest heaving with anger and grief. The days that followed were a blur. I avoided Luke's calls and ignored texts from my mother. The betrayal consumed me, leaving no room for anything else. I didn't go to work, barely ate, and spent most of my time curled up on the couch, trying to process what had happened. Eventually, Megan, my best friend, showed up unannounced. She took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. I heard, she said softly. How? I croaked, my voice hoarse from crying. Your mom told me. She said you'd need someone to talk to. I pulled back, anger flashing in my eyes. She has no right to involve you in this. None of this would have happened if she hadn't. My voice broke and I collapsed into sobs again. Megan held me as I cried, her presence a small comfort in the chaos. You don't have to talk about it if you're not ready, she said gently. But I'm here for you. Whatever you need. Her support was a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge of despair. But even as I began to pick up the pieces of my shattered life, I knew I couldn't escape the reality of what had happened. My mother was pregnant with my fiancé's child, and there was no undoing that. No matter how much distance I put between us, their betrayal would always cast a shadow over my life. And I had no idea how, or if, I could ever move past it. The days following my confrontation with my mother and Luke were a haze of anger, grief, and unbearable loneliness. I couldn't bring myself to speak to either of them, and the weight of their betrayal felt like a boulder crushing my chest. My once perfect world had crumbled into a mess of lies and shattered trust, and I didn't know how to move forward. The first step was distance. I packed a bag, left the house Luke and I shared, and moved into a small hotel on the edge of town. I couldn't bear to see the walls that had witnessed our love, or whatever illusion of love we'd had, nor did I want to stay in a place that reminded me of what I'd lost. Each night as I lay on the unfamiliar hotel bed, the silence felt deafening. No laughter, no conversations, just the echoes of my own pain. Luke called repeatedly, his name lighting up my phone screen every few hours. I refused to answer. His voicemails ranged from apologetic to desperate, pleading with me to come back and let him explain. But what more could he say? He had betrayed me in the worst way possible, and nothing he said could change that. My mother too tried to reach out. She sent long text messages filled with apologies, excuses, and declarations of love for both me and Luke. The words felt hollow, like a cruel attempt to salvage what she had destroyed. I couldn't even bring myself to read most of them. The isolation was unbearable, yet I couldn't bring myself to reach out to anyone except Megan. She was my lifeline during those dark days, the only person I felt I could trust. We met for coffee one afternoon, and as I poured out my feelings, the weight of it all seemed to crush me anew. I feel so lost, I admitted, staring into my untouched cup. They were my whole world, Meg. Luke was my future, and my mom, she was everything to me. How do I even begin to move on from this? Megan reached across the table, squeezing my hand. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one day at a time. And remember, this isn't your fault. They're the ones who messed up, not you. Her words brought a flicker of comfort, but they didn't erase the pain. The betrayal felt too raw, too fresh. Everywhere I went, I saw reminders of them. Couples holding hands, mothers and daughters laughing together. It all felt like a cruel joke, a constant reminder of what I had lost. As the days turned into weeks, I began to spiral. My self-worth, already shaken, seemed to disintegrate entirely. I couldn't stop questioning myself. Was I not enough for Luke? Had I missed something, failed in some way that pushed him into my mother's arms? And my mother, did she love me at all, or was I just a pawn in her selfish need for attention? The nights were the worst. Alone in the dark, my mind replayed every painful moment, every lie, every betrayal. I found myself crying until there were no tears left, my chest heaving with sobs that echoed in the empty room. One evening, as I sat staring at the blank television screen, a knock at the door startled me. My heart raced. What if it was Luke? Or worse, my mother? Reluctantly, I opened the door to find my brother Alex standing there. I heard what happened, he said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. How? I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. Mom told me, he said, his jaw tightening. I can't believe she did this to you. To us. And Luke, he's a damn coward. Hearing his anger mirrored my own, I felt a surge of emotion. Alex sat beside me, pulling me into a hug. For the first time in weeks, I let myself lean on someone, sobbing into his shoulder as he whispered reassurances. You don't have to go through this alone, he said firmly. We'll figure it out together. Alex's support was the first step in pulling myself out of the pit I'd been drowning in. He helped me see that their betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth but of their own failures. Slowly, I began to reclaim pieces of myself. I found a therapist, someone to help me untangle the mess of emotions I was grappling with. Through our sessions, I started to understand that healing wouldn't come from answers. They'd never be able to justify their actions in a way that would make sense to me. Healing would come from letting go of the need to understand and instead focusing on myself. It was a slow process, but each day felt like a small victory. I started journaling, pouring my pain onto the pages as a way to release it. I took walks, breathing in the fresh air and reminding myself that there was still beauty in the world, even if my own life felt shattered. But despite the small steps forward, one truth remained. My relationships with Luke and my mother were beyond repair. I couldn't forgive them, not yet, maybe not ever, and the thought of facing them again filled me with dread. They had broken me, but I was determined to rebuild. Piece by piece, I would find myself again, even if it meant leaving them behind forever. After weeks of existing in the aftermath of betrayal, I knew I couldn't keep living in the shadows of what Luke and my mother had done. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. I needed to start rebuilding. Their actions had broken me, but I wasn't going to let them define the rest of my life. The first step was creating distance. I blocked both Luke and my mother on my phone. The constant barrage of messages had become unbearable, and I realized that any hope for closure from them was a false promise. The closure I needed wouldn't come from their apologies or explanations. It had to come from within me. I also decided to move. Staying in the same town where they both lived was suffocating. Everywhere I went, there were memories of them, of us. Restaurants we'd dined at, parks we'd walked through, places we'd shared laughter. I found a small apartment 2 towns over. A fresh start in a place where I could begin to heal without their shadows looming over me. Moving day was bittersweet. As I packed my belongings, I came across reminders of the life I'd planned with Luke. The engagement ring I had tucked away after our fight, the wedding invitations we'd excitedly chosen together, pictures of the two of us smiling, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. Each item felt like a stab to the heart, but I forced myself to box them up and leave them behind. Holding on to those pieces of the past would only weigh me down. Once I settled into my new apartment, I started to focus on myself for the first time in years. I'd spent so much of my life caring for others. My mother after my father's death, Luke during our relationship, that I had neglected my own needs. Now it was time to change that. I signed up for a yoga class at a local studio. At first it felt strange, almost awkward to be surrounded by strangers while trying to find peace. But as the weeks went by, I began to feel a sense of calm I hadn't known I needed. The slow, deliberate movements and the quiet meditations gave me a space to breathe, to release the tension that had been building inside me for months. I also threw myself into my career. Work became a sanctuary, a place where I could focus on tasks that reminded me of my strengths and capabilities. With every project I completed, I felt a little more like myself again, strong, independent, and competent. Therapy remained a cornerstone of my healing process. My therapist helped me navigate the tangled web of emotions I was experiencing: anger, sadness, betrayal, and even guilt. She helped me understand that their actions were not a reflection of my worth, but of their flaws. That realization, while empowering, didn't erase the pain, but it gave me the tools to start letting go of the blame I had placed on myself. One of the hardest parts of rebuilding was deciding how to approach the future relationship, or lack thereof, with my mother. Therapy helped me see that forgiveness didn't have to mean reconciliation. I could forgive her in my heart for my own peace without allowing her back into my life. For now, I chose to maintain the distance. Luke, on the other hand, was a different story. I wanted nothing to do with him. The love I once felt for him had turned into a deep-seated anger and disgust. The thought of him being part of my life in any way was unthinkable. He had made his choice and so had I. Through the process of rebuilding, I began to rediscover parts of myself I had forgotten. I started painting again, a hobby I hadn't touched since college. It became a form of therapy in itself, allowing me to pour my emotions onto the canvas. Some days the paintings were dark and chaotic, reflecting the turmoil inside me. Other days they were vibrant and hopeful, small glimpses of the light I was beginning to feel again. I also found new friendships. At yoga and through work, I met people who brought fresh perspectives into my life. Their kindness and support reminded me that not everyone would betray me, that there were still good people in the world who could be trusted. As weeks turned into months, I found myself smiling more, laughing even. The ache in my chest hadn't disappeared completely, but it had dulled, no longer an all-consuming force. I still had bad days, days where memories would resurface and tears would come without warning, but they were becoming fewer and farther between. One day, as I sat on my apartment balcony watching the sunset, I realized I had made it through the worst. I was still standing, still breathing, still fighting for myself. The woman who had been shattered by betrayal was slowly being replaced by someone stronger, someone who had learned to value herself above all else. I wasn't fully healed yet, and I knew the scars of this experience would remain with me. But I also knew that those scars didn't define me. They were simply part of my story, a reminder of what I had overcome. And as I watched the sky turn shades of orange and pink, I felt a small but powerful spark of hope for the future. For the first time in a long time, I believed that I could be happy again. And that belief was enough to keep me moving forward. Months had passed since I started rebuilding my life, and while the wounds Luke and my mother left were still raw, they had started to heal. Slowly but surely I was finding myself again. Yet there was one thing I hadn't yet figured out: how to find closure with them. I'd avoided any direct contact since the day I left, choosing instead to focus on my own recovery. But deep down, I knew that I couldn't fully move on without addressing the unresolved emotions lingering between us. Forgiveness, not for them but for my own peace, was something I desperately needed to confront. Started with my mother. One morning, after weeks of internal debate, I sent her a message. It was brief, but it carried the weight of everything I had struggled to put into words. "Mom, we need to talk. Let me know when you're ready." Her response came almost immediately. "I've been waiting for this. Come over whenever you feel ready." That evening I found myself standing at her front door. My hands trembled as I rang the bell, the sound echoing in my chest like a drumbeat. When she opened the door, she looked different, older, more fragile. Guilt was etched into every line of her face, and for the first time, I saw how much the situation had worn on her too. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. The house felt smaller than I remembered, almost claustrophobic. Memories of my childhood filled the space, blending with the pain of the present. We sat down in the living room, the silence between us heavy. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I've said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I never meant to hurt you. What I did was selfish and unforgivable." I nodded, my throat tight. "I've thought about that a lot, whether I can forgive you or not. And honestly, I don't know if I'll ever fully be able to. But I also know I can't keep carrying this anger. It's eating me alive." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know how much I love you and how sorry I am for what I've done." Her words didn't erase the pain, but they felt genuine, and that was enough for me in that moment. "I need distance," I said finally. "For my own sanity, I need space from you and everything that happened. Maybe one day we can rebuild, but right now I can't." She nodded, her tears spilling over. "I understand. I'll respect whatever you need." I left her house that night feeling lighter, as though a small part of the weight I'd been carrying had been lifted. Forgiving her wasn't about forgetting or condoning what she did. It was about freeing myself from the hold her betrayal had over me. A few weeks later, I knew it was time to confront Luke. Unlike with my mother, I didn't want reconciliation or even understanding. I just wanted closure. I reached out to him and we agreed to meet at a quiet cafe. When he walked in, he looked almost the same. Still handsome, still the man I'd once loved, but there was a tension in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Thanks for coming," he said as he sat down across from me. "I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I don't know why you did what you did, Luke, and I probably never will. But I need to say this. You broke me in ways I didn't think were possible. I loved you. I trusted you. And you destroyed that." He nodded, his jaw tightening. "I know I did, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I was selfish and I hurt you in ways you didn't deserve." His apology felt rehearsed, but it didn't matter. I wasn't there for him, I was there for me. "I'm moving on," I said, my voice steady. "I don't want you in my life, not now, not ever. I just needed you to know that I won't let what you did define me anymore." He looked down, his hands clasped together. "I understand. I hope you find happiness again." I nodded, standing to leave. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of finality. Luke and my mother were part of my past, but they didn't have to dictate my future. In the months that followed, I focused entirely on myself. I traveled, taking solo trips to places I'd always dreamed of visiting. I dove deeper into my hobbies, found joy in the little things, and started to feel alive again. Through it all, I learned one invaluable truth. Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't come from the people who hurt you. It comes from within. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or rekindling relationships. It meant letting go of the pain and giving myself permission to live again. And as I stood on the edge of a new chapter in my life, I knew that I was ready. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but they no longer defined me. I was stronger now, and I had finally found peace.
They missed every milestone of mine for his glory. Now they faced the consequences of my silent wedding. From the moment I was born, my world seemed to orbit around someone else, my younger brother, Mike. I am a 27-year-old woman who grew up in a family where favoritism wasn't just subtle, it was blatant and painful. My mother, a 50-year-old woman whose affection for Mike bordered on obsession, underwent a startling transformation after his birth. She turned from a loving and attentive mother into someone who poured all her energy into coddling her son. My father, also 50, wasn't much better. Though he still expressed some love and support for me, his fear of challenging my mother rendered him complicit in their neglect. Mike, 6 years younger than me, has always been a man-child, a selfish, entitled individual who thrived on being the center of attention. He knew he was the favored child and took every opportunity to rub it in my face. His antics ranged from petty acts of sabotage to outright cruelty, which only worsened as we grew older. The only beacon of light in my childhood was my grandfather, a wise and compassionate 76-year-old man who loved me unconditionally. He often stood up for me, calling out my parents' blatant favoritism. He would always tell me, "You remind me of your grandmother, strong, kind, and worth so much more than they give you credit for." But despite his efforts, he lived across the country, and his distance made it impossible for him to shield me from the brunt of my family's neglect. My parents' favoritism affected every facet of my life. They didn't attend my ballet recitals or my high school and university graduations, always citing Mike's more important commitments as their reason. Even my education was sacrificed for him. My college fund was mysteriously depleted after a house fire, only for me to discover later that the money had been given to Mike for a car and a house when he started college. It was during my university years, where I attended on a scholarship, that I met Lucas. He became my anchor in a turbulent sea, my best friend, and eventually my partner. With him and a close-knit group of friends, I was finally able to distance myself from my toxic family dynamic. Moving out of my parents' house marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life. As Lucas and I built our lives together, our relationship flourished. He supported me emotionally and helped me see my own worth. After years of battling the scars left by my family, Lucas' love and unwavering belief in me gave me the strength to envision a future where I could finally stand tall, free from the shadow of favoritism and neglect. But even as I tried to move forward, the grip of my past lingered. My parents and brother continued to downplay my achievements and dismiss my existence. Little did they know that their behavior would culminate in an event that would forever alter the course of our family dynamic: the day of my wedding. The day I had dreamt of for years, my wedding, was finally here. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, a celebration of love and new beginnings. Yet, as I stood in front of the mirror in my wedding gown, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The scars of my family's treatment had made me wary of expecting anything positive from them. Deep down, I knew they would find a way to make my day about Mike, as they always did. Lucas had warned me not to extend invitations to my parents and Mike. "They don't care about you, and you'll only regret it," he said. But a part of me still longed for their approval, no matter how undeserved it was. I convinced myself that my wedding might be the turning point, the moment they would finally see me as someone worth celebrating. From the moment my family arrived, it was clear I had made a mistake. My mother, dressed in a white gown that rivaled my own, greeted me with a curt nod before showering Mike with praise for his new promotion, a minor job upgrade he had announced conveniently a week before my wedding. My father, looking as apologetic as ever, followed in her footsteps, while Mike walked in with the swagger of someone who believed the event was in his honor. The ceremony was beautiful despite their indifference. Lucas and I exchanged vows that brought tears to everyone's eyes, except my family's. I noticed my mother checking her watch during the vows and my father stealing glances at Mike, who was busy on his phone. But the real betrayal came at the reception. As Lucas and I prepared to share our first dance as husband and wife, Mike stood up and grabbed the microphone. "Before we get to the dancing," he said, flashing his signature grin, "I have an announcement to make." The room fell silent. My heart sank. Mike's announcement was as self-serving as I had feared. He was engaged to his girlfriend of 6 months, and they were planning a wedding in 3 months' time. The guests clapped politely, while my parents beamed with pride, oblivious to the pain etched on my face. My mother was the first to rush to Mike's side, hugging him and gushing about what a perfect couple they made. I locked eyes with Lucas, who looked as livid as I felt. He had warned me. He had been right all along. My parents' blatant disregard for my feelings stung deeper than I could have imagined. The night spiraled further downhill as my parents spent the rest of the reception fawning over Mike and his fiancée, leaving me to wonder why I had ever expected them to behave differently. That night, as Lucas held me in his arms, I vowed never to let their toxicity ruin another moment of my life. The betrayal at my wedding became the catalyst for a decision I should have made long ago: cutting ties with them for good. The fallout from my wedding was the final nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family. In the days that followed, Lucas and I sat down to discuss what had transpired. His frustration was clear, but more than that, he was heartbroken for me. "They've shown you who they are, time and again," he said gently, holding my hand. "Maybe it's time to believe them and move forward." For the first time, I truly listened. The years of emotional neglect and favoritism had left deep wounds, but clinging to the hope of change was only keeping those wounds fresh. It was time to stop looking for love in a place it could never be found. I decided to cut ties with my family, not in anger, but out of self-preservation. It was one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made. I composed a letter, explaining my feelings and the reasons behind my choice. "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your love and approval," I wrote. "But I've come to realize that my worth is not tied to how you treat me. I need to focus on building a life with people who value me for who I am, not who they want me to be." I sent the letter and blocked their numbers, knowing there would be backlash, but also knowing it was necessary. With my family no longer a part of my life, I was free to explore who I was outside their shadow. Lucas was my rock during this transition, encouraging me to rediscover my passions and build a life filled with joy and purpose. One of the first things I did was join a local community group focused on creative writing, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. Pouring my emotions into stories became a therapeutic outlet. The group's support and validation reminded me that I had something to offer the world, something my family had always overlooked. I also began volunteering at a women's shelter, connecting with people who had faced their own struggles. Their resilience inspired me to embrace my own strength and see my story as one of survival and growth rather than victimhood. Through these connections, I found a sense of purpose and belonging that I had never experienced with my family. Lucas and I grew closer during this time, building a foundation of love and respect that became the bedrock of our marriage. We made it a point to celebrate even the smallest victories, from trying a new recipe to completing a hike we'd always wanted to do. Each moment felt like a step toward reclaiming the happiness I had always been denied. Over time, the pain of my family's betrayal began to fade. It didn't disappear entirely. It had shaped who I was after all, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer the girl who begged for scraps of love and attention. I was a woman who had learned to find love within herself and in the people who truly cared. In cutting ties with my family, I gained something far more valuable: freedom. Freedom to be myself, to chase my dreams, and to build a life full of the love and respect I had always deserved. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest edges of pain. After severing ties with my family, I expected to feel relief, and I did, but it was accompanied by an emptiness I hadn't anticipated. Cutting them off didn't erase the years of hurt or the longing for their love. It merely gave me space to confront those feelings on my own terms. Lucas was my anchor during this turbulent period. He never pressured me to heal on a particular timeline, offering unwavering support as I navigated the complexities of my emotions. Through therapy, I began unpacking the layers of resentment and grief I had carried for so long. My therapist helped me see that forgiveness didn't mean condoning their actions or inviting them back into my life. Instead, it was about freeing myself from the grip of anger and finding peace. The journey to forgiveness was neither linear nor easy. I had to confront painful memories, from being overlooked at family gatherings to the harsh criticisms that had chipped away at my self-esteem. For years, I had internalized their rejection as a reflection of my own inadequacy. Therapy helped me understand that their behavior was more about their limitations than my worth. One day, during a session, my therapist asked, "What would you say to your younger self if she were sitting here right now?" The question caught me off guard, but the answer came surprisingly quickly. I'd tell her that she's enough just as she is, that she doesn't have to earn love. It should be given freely. Saying those words felt like releasing a deep breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. As I worked on healing, I also began rediscovering parts of myself that had been buried under years of trying to meet impossible expectations. I started painting again, a hobby I had loved as a child but abandoned when my family dismissed it as frivolous. With every brushstroke, I felt a sense of liberation, as if I were reclaiming pieces of my identity. Lucas and I also made an effort to surround ourselves with friends who felt like family. We hosted dinners, celebrated milestones, and created a community of people who uplifted and supported each other. Their presence reminded me that family isn't defined by blood, but by the love and respect shared between people. One of the most profound moments of my healing journey came when I revisited the idea of forgiveness, not for my family's sake, but for my own. I wrote them a letter, not to send but to release the weight of unresolved emotions. In it, I acknowledged the hurt they caused but also expressed gratitude for the lessons it taught me. You showed me what love shouldn't look like, I wrote, and in doing so, you helped me recognize true love when I found it. By the time I finished the letter, I felt lighter. I didn't need their acknowledgement or apology to move forward. Forgiveness wasn't about them, it was about me. It allowed me to close a chapter of my life with grace and step into a future defined not by pain, but by resilience and self-love. Time moved forward, as it always does, carrying me further from the pain of the past and closer to a place of acceptance. After years of self-discovery, healing, and forgiveness, I found myself at a crossroads, a moment where I had to decide how to carry my story forward. Would I allow my family's rejection to define me, or would I carve a new path, one rooted in love, resilience, and authenticity? Closure came unexpectedly, not in a grand gesture or an emotional reunion, but in the quiet realization that I no longer needed validation from the people who had hurt me. For so long, I had believed that closure required their acknowledgement of the pain they had caused. But as I grew, I understood that closure is something we give ourselves, a gift of letting go and moving forward. One autumn morning, as the leaves turned shades of amber and crimson, I decided to visit the town I had left behind. It wasn't an act of reconciliation, but a way to honor the person I had once been and the journey that had brought me here. Walking through familiar streets, I felt a mix of nostalgia and detachment. The places that once held so much meaning now seemed smaller, their significance dimmed by time and distance. I paused outside my childhood home, its paint slightly faded, the garden overgrown. Memories surfaced, some sweet, others bitter, but they no longer held power over me. I realized that while my family had shaped my early years, they didn't define who I had become. As I stood there, a neighbor from years ago approached me. She recognized me immediately and smiled warmly. "You've grown into such a strong woman," she said, her words filled with genuine admiration. That brief interaction felt like a quiet affirmation, a reminder that others had seen my worth even when my family couldn't. Returning to my current life, I felt a newfound sense of freedom. Lucas and I celebrated this milestone by planting a tree in our backyard, a symbol of growth, resilience, and the new roots we had established together. Watching it sway gently in the wind, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life didn't stop presenting challenges, but I faced them with a strength I had earned through years of struggle and self-reflection. Lucas and I continued to nurture our chosen family, a community of friends who celebrated us for who we were. Our home became a sanctuary of love, laughter, and acceptance, the kind of environment I had once longed for, but now could create myself. The most beautiful part of this journey was the realization that every ending holds the seed of a new beginning. By letting go of the past, I had opened the door to a future full of possibility. My story was no longer defined by rejection, but by resilience. And in that resilience, I found something more powerful than closure. I found myself. As I reflect on my journey, the lessons I've learned stand out as the most valuable part of my story. What began as a path filled with pain and rejection transformed into an odyssey of self-discovery, resilience, and unwavering hope. I never imagined that my darkest days would eventually illuminate the truths that now guide me. Another critical lesson was the importance of forgiveness, not just forgiving those who hurt me, but forgiving myself. For years, I carried guilt and shame, wondering if I had failed in some way. But through therapy, introspection, and the love of my chosen family, I learned that I was not to blame for the choices others made. Letting go of that guilt was liberating. It allowed me to approach my life with a sense of clarity and peace that I had never known. Lucas often reminded me of the beauty of impermanence. "Nothing lasts forever," he would say, "not the pain, not the joy, but the lessons, they stay with us." His words resonated deeply as I navigated the ups and downs of life. Pain, though excruciating in the moment, became a teacher, showing me my strength and capacity to endure. Joy, fleeting as it sometimes felt, reminded me of life's precious moments and the importance of cherishing them. Gratitude became another cornerstone of my healing. At first, it felt impossible to find anything to be thankful for in the chaos and heartbreak. But as the years went on, I began to see how each challenge had shaped me into the person I am today. I found gratitude for Lucas, who stood by me when I felt unlovable, for the friends who became my family, and for the countless small victories that marked my path to healing. Most of all, I felt gratitude for the person I had become. The girl who once doubted her worth had grown into a woman who knew her value. The wounds of the past had healed into scars, reminders of battles fought and won. Today, as I sit on my porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I am filled with a sense of contentment. Life is far from perfect, but it is mine, a life built on resilience, love, and authenticity. I no longer mourn what I lost. Instead, I celebrate what I've gained, lasting lessons, a heart full of gratitude, and a future brimming with hope. The day I decided to start over was not marked by any grand gesture or dramatic turning point. It was a quiet realization, one that came as I sat by the window, watching the rain trace patterns on the glass. I had spent years tethered to the weight of the past, replaying the heartbreaks and mistakes that had left me feeling lost. But in that still moment, something shifted. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened. It was about finally giving myself permission to move forward. Embracing a new horizon didn't mean leaving everything behind. It meant taking the lessons, the scars, and even the lingering pain, and using them as fuel for the journey ahead. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Starting over rarely is. But the thought of building a life on my own terms filled me with a cautious kind of hope, a spark that had been absent for far too long. One of the first steps was rediscovering who I was outside of the roles I had played for others. For so long, I had defined myself by what I could give, whether it was as a partner, a friend, or a dutiful family member. I had poured so much of myself into others that I had forgotten what it meant to simply be me. So, I began to explore. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, like painting and hiking. I took myself on dates to museums and coffee shops, learning to enjoy my own company. The next step was embracing the unknown. This was perhaps the most daunting part, as someone who had always clung to the safety of predictability. But there was a strange kind of beauty in stepping into the unfamiliar. I moved to a new city, one where no one knew my story. It felt like a clean slate, a chance to reinvent myself without the shadows of my past looming over me. Of course, the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were days when doubt crept in, whispering that I wasn't strong enough to make it on my own. There were moments when loneliness threatened to pull me back into old patterns of seeking comfort in the wrong places. But each time I stumbled, I reminded myself why I had chosen this path. Each setback was an opportunity to reaffirm my commitment to myself. As time went on, I began to see the fruits of my efforts. The friendships I formed were deeper and more genuine, built on mutual respect rather than convenience or obligation. The work I did felt meaningful because it aligned with my values, not just my need for approval. And the person I saw in the mirror was someone I respected, someone who had fought hard to reclaim her life and wasn't afraid to dream again. Now, as I stand on the precipice of this new chapter, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not just for the good that has come my way, but for the struggles that taught me I was capable of enduring. Embracing new horizons wasn't just about starting over. It was about finding the courage to live fully, unapologetically, and with a heart wide open to whatever comes next. It was the kind of phone call no one ever wants to receive. The news shattered the quiet rhythm of my life like a stone through glass. My father, the man I thought was indestructible, had been diagnosed with a rare and aggressive illness. In that moment, I felt my world tilt off its axis. Everything I thought I understood about strength and resilience was about to be tested in ways I couldn't imagine. I always believed strength was about control, about keeping emotions in check, solving problems quickly, and never letting others see you falter. But as the days turned into weeks and I watched my father grapple with his diagnosis, I began to see strength in a new light. It wasn't about being stoic or unyielding. It was about facing the unimaginable with grace, vulnerability, and determination. My father had always been a man of quiet wisdom, someone who never complained and rarely spoke of his struggles. But as his illness progressed, he began to open up in ways I had never seen before. He shared stories of his youth, moments of fear, and lessons learned from his own failures. He spoke about love, loss, and the importance of living with purpose, even when life felt impossibly hard. One evening, as we sat together watching the sun set, he said something that stayed with me. Strength isn't about pretending you're okay when you're not. It's about allowing yourself to feel everything, the pain, the fear, the hope, and still choosing to move forward. Those words became my mantra in the months that followed. They carried me through the long nights spent researching treatments and the endless appointments that seemed to blur into one another. They gave me the courage to have difficult conversations, to ask for help when I needed it, and to find moments of joy amid the heartbreak. As my father's health declined, I also began to discover my own reserves of strength. I learned to advocate for him with doctors, navigate the complexities of caregiving, and balance my own emotions without losing sight of the present. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, but I kept going, driven by the love and respect I had for the man who had always been my anchor. Through it all, I came to understand that true strength is deeply rooted in connection, with ourselves, with others, and with the world around us. It's found in the willingness to be vulnerable, to ask for support, and to show up fully, even when the odds feel insurmountable. When my father passed, it was devastating. But it wasn't the end of the story. The lessons he imparted, the resilience he modeled, and the love we shared became a part of me, shaping the person I am today. True strength, I realized, isn't about standing tall in the face of adversity. It's about bending without breaking, finding light in the darkness, and continuing to move forward, one step at a time. The city had always been my cage, a place of endless motion where silence was a rare commodity and solitude was almost impossible to find. It was the place I had once loved, the hustle, the rush, the chase for promotions, and the sweet scent of success. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like home. Instead of a place where I thrived, it became a suffocating environment that drained all joy from me. I didn't realize how far I had fallen into this spiral until one day, exhausted and drained, I found myself booking a last-minute trip to a small village nestled in the mountains. A village I had read about once in a book, but had never imagined visiting. I was desperate for a change, a space to breathe, to think, and most importantly, to escape from the relentless pace that had taken over my life. The journey to the village was long and tiresome. The roads were winding, and the trees seemed endless. But as soon as I stepped off the bus, the air hit me, crisp and cool, filled with the scent of pine and earth. The sound of birdsong replaced the constant honking of car horns I had grown accustomed to, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief. I stayed in a cozy wooden cabin, owned by an elderly couple named Miriam and Thomas. They didn't speak much English, but their warmth and kindness were enough to make me feel like I belonged. The pace of life here was something I had forgotten even existed, slow, deliberate, and wholly grounded in the present. At first, I was overwhelmed by the silence. Without my phone constantly buzzing, and without the pressure of city life, I felt lost. What was I supposed to do with this stillness? But after a few days, I started to welcome it. I took long walks through the forest, discovering hidden streams and colorful wildflowers that felt like little miracles. I spent time in the garden with Miriam, learning about plants I had only ever seen in books. I even found myself reading novels by the fire, novels I hadn't touched in years. One day, while exploring a nearby trail, I stumbled upon a chapel. It was small and weathered, with wooden doors that creaked when I pushed them open. Inside, the sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting vibrant colors across the wooden pews. I sat down on one of the benches, and for the first time, I allowed myself to be still. The silence enveloped me, and in that space, I realized something profound. For years, I had been running, chasing success, avoiding my feelings, and drowning in the noise of the city. But here, in this quiet chapel, I found a part of myself I had forgotten. Peace was not something I needed to achieve or earn. It was something to embrace. By the time I returned to the city, I was no longer the same person. The lessons I learned in that village stayed with me. The beauty of simplicity, the strength in stillness, and the importance of creating space for what truly matters. I had found my sanctuary, not just in the village, but within myself. And now, I carry that peace with me, no longer a prisoner to the chaos of city life.
He cheated on me with my twin sister and now he can't tell us apart. Growing up, my sister Sophie and I were inseparable. Identical twins with faces so similar that even our parents occasionally mixed us up. But as alike as we appeared on the outside, our personalities were worlds apart. Sophie was bold, confident, and magnetic, always drawing people in with her charm. I, on the other hand, preferred the quieter corners of life, finding solace in books, art, and intimate conversations. Despite our differences, we were each other's safe space. Sophie always said, "No matter what, we're each other's number one," and I believed her. That bond gave me comfort, especially when life got messy. But as we grew older, I began noticing cracks in our perfect sisterhood. Subtle, almost imperceptible things, like the way Sophie would sometimes step into the spotlight at my expense, or how she'd joke about how people couldn't tell us apart as if it didn't bother her. Then there was Ethan, my boyfriend of 3 years. He was everything I'd ever dreamed of, thoughtful, loyal, and full of a quiet strength that made me feel safe. Sophie adored him too, but I didn't think much of it. After all, she was my sister and Ethan was mine. They got along well, which I saw as a good thing. It never occurred to me that their friendliness could mean anything more. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs. The moments when Sophie would linger too long in conversations with Ethan, or the way her eyes lit up when he laughed at her jokes. But I trusted them both implicitly. Ethan often told me, "You and Sophie are so alike, it's uncanny. It's like you share the same soul." At the time, I took it as a compliment. Now, I wonder if that was his excuse all along. Our family and friends used to say Sophie and I were like two halves of a whole. But as I look back, I realized that being so intertwined meant I never really learned how to draw boundaries. I let Sophie's boldness overshadow me, believing her intentions were always pure because she was my sister. And I let Ethan's words blur the lines between admiration and something deeper. At that moment, everything seemed perfect. But perfection, I would soon learn, is often a mask for the ugliest truths. It started with little things, barely noticeable at first. Ethan's phone would buzz late at night and he'd glance at it before quickly flipping it over. "Work stuff," he'd mutter when I asked. He began working later, coming home with vague excuses about deadlines and meetings that didn't quite add up. I tried to brush it off. After all, relationships had rough patches, right? But the gnawing feeling in my chest wouldn't go away. One evening, I was tidying up the living room while Ethan was in the shower. His phone lit up on the coffee table and instinctively my eyes flicked toward it. A message from Sophie. "I miss you. When can I see you again?" My heart stopped. My hands froze mid-motion as the words seared into my brain. It couldn't mean what it seemed to mean. Could it? I felt like an intruder as I picked up his phone, but I couldn't stop myself. My hands trembled as I scrolled up through their conversation. The texts weren't long, but they didn't need to be. Inside jokes, shared memories that I wasn't a part of, and worst of all, subtle affection. "Last night was amazing," one message read. My stomach churned and bile rose in my throat. I didn't wait for Ethan to come out of the shower. I confronted him the moment he stepped into the room, his hair still dripping and a towel wrapped around his waist. "What's going on with you and Sophie?" I demanded, holding up his phone. His eyes widened, the color draining from his face. "Wait, let me explain," he stammered, reaching for the phone. But I yanked it away, my voice trembling with anger. "Explain what? That you've been sneaking around with my sister behind my back?" The look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Instead, he slumped onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he whispered. "It just did. I couldn't believe it. The man I trusted, the man I loved, had betrayed me. And Sophie, my other half, my twin, had been part of it." The weight of their betrayal crushed me, leaving me gasping for air. The next morning I found myself standing at Sophie's door, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. I hadn't slept all night. My mind replayed the texts over and over, each one cutting deeper into my soul. I didn't even tell her I was coming. I couldn't give her the chance to dodge me. She opened the door with her usual radiant smile, but it faltered the moment she saw my face. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past her before she could object. My voice was shaky, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. She closed the door quietly, her back against it, avoiding my eyes. "What's going on between you and Ethan?" I demanded, my voice cracking as I tried to hold back tears. Her face went pale and she pressed her lips together. For a moment I thought she might deny it, but instead she sighed and sank onto the couch. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she began, echoing Ethan's words. I wanted to scream. It just happened." "That's not an answer," I snapped, my voice rising. "You're my sister, Sophie. How could you do this to me?" She finally looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I didn't plan it, okay? I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you. But he was there. He listened to me. And somewhere along the way She stopped, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. Sorry." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You think sorry can fix this? You've destroyed everything, Sophie. Everything." She stood abruptly, anger flashing in her eyes. "You don't get it, do you? You always had everything. Everyone always loved you more. I didn't mean for this to happen, but maybe it's the only thing that was ever mine." Her words hit me like a slap. The person I trusted most in the world, the person I thought knew me better than anyone, had not only betrayed me but resented me too. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or walk away. I turned to leave, my voice low but firm. "You can have him, Sophie. But you've lost me forever." And with that I walked out, tears streaming down my face. The drive home felt like an eternity, each mile stretching under the weight of my broken heart. I couldn't stop the tears. They came in waves, blurring the road ahead. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. Inside, the silence was deafening. The life I had built with Ethan, the memories we had created, now felt like a cruel joke. Days turned into weeks, but the pain didn't fade. It sat heavy on my chest, a constant reminder of what I had lost. Not just Ethan, but Sophie too. They weren't just people in my life. They were pillars, and now both were gone. My mind became a battlefield, riddled with questions I couldn't answer. Was it my fault? Was I not enough? Was I so interchangeable with Sophie that even Ethan couldn't tell the difference? I stopped answering calls, even from friends who meant well. I couldn't bear to hear their pity, to relive the betrayal through their shocked gasps and words of consolation. Instead, I sank deeper into myself, replaying every moment I'd ever shared with Ethan and Sophie, searching for the cracks I had missed. One night, unable to sleep, I pulled out an old photo album. Page after page of memories stared back at me. Sophie and I as kids, grinning ear to ear. Ethan and me on our first anniversary, his arms wrapped protectively around me. The three of us together, laughing, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I slammed the album shut, the pain too much to bear. But something shifted as the weeks dragged on. The anger that had simmered beneath my sadness began to rise. And with it, a determination I hadn't felt before. I realized I couldn't let their betrayal define me. I had spent so much of my life trying to keep the peace, letting Sophie's boldness overshadow me, letting Ethan's words blur who I was. I needed to find myself again, to rebuild the person I had been before them. Slowly, I began taking small steps. Reading books I had loved, journaling my thoughts, even going for walks in the park. The world felt different, sharper, but in a way it also felt more real. The cracks in my life were there, but for the first time I felt like I could see beyond them. It was a month later when I bumped into Ethan again. I was at the grocery store, arms full of produce, when I saw him at the end of the aisle. My heart skipped a beat. He looked thinner, more disheveled than I remembered, his usual confidence replaced with an awkward hesitancy as his eyes met mine. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet, almost unsure. For a moment I considered walking away, but something in me needed closure. Or maybe I just wanted to see if he'd crumble under the weight of his guilt. "Ethan," I replied coolly, my grip tightening on the basket. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite place, a mix of longing and confusion. "I've missed you," he said finally, taking a hesitant step closer. My stomach churned. I wanted to lash out, to scream, but instead I stayed calm, watching him squirm. "Really? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Or was it Sophie you missed? His face reddened and he fumbled with his words. It's not like that anymore. I don't even talk to her. I stared at him, waiting for him to say something more, but instead he blurted out, "You're wearing your hair different." His voice was almost wistful, like he was trying to draw me back into the past. "I haven't changed my hair," I said flatly. His brow furrowed and I watched as confusion flickered across his face. For a moment I realized what was happening. He wasn't sure if I was Sophie or me. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut and I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped my lips. "You don't even know, do you?" I said, my voice rising. "You can't tell us apart." His eyes widened and he opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off. "That's what I was to you, interchangeable. A face, a body. You never really saw me, did you?" "Of course I did," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction and his words felt hollow. I shook my head, the final pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Ethan hadn't betrayed me because of anything I had done. He had betrayed me because he never truly valued me as an individual. For the first time I felt a strange sense of clarity, as if a fog had lifted. I didn't need his answers anymore. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, unable to distinguish between the woman he had loved and the one he had betrayed me with. As I walked out of the grocery store, the weight I had carried for months began to lift. Ethan's confusion, his inability to distinguish me from Sophie, had finally made one thing clear. I was more than just a mirror image of someone else. For so long I had allowed my identity to be intertwined with others. Sophie's boldness, Ethan's affection. But now I realized I was neither defined nor diminished by their choices. That night I sat in my apartment with a blank notebook in front of me. It had been years since I'd written anything just for myself, and at first the words came slowly. But as I wrote, pouring my pain, anger, and hopes onto the page, I felt lighter. Each sentence was a reminder of my strength. Each page a step toward reclaiming the person I had lost. The next day I started making changes. I removed the pictures of Ethan and Sophie from my apartment, boxing them up and shoving them into the back of my closet. I didn't need to see their faces anymore. They didn't deserve to take up space in my life. I even reached out to an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone who had always supported me but whom I'd neglected in my effort to keep peace with Sophie. To my surprise, she welcomed me back with open arms, reminding me that I wasn't as alone as I had felt. But the real test came when Sophie called. Her number flashed on my screen and for a moment I considered letting it ring. Then I answered. "Hey," she said hesitantly, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I wanted to see how you're doing." "I'm fine," I replied, my tone calm but firm. There was a pause and I could sense her searching for the right words. "I miss you," she finally said. "I know I messed up, but I don't want to lose you." I took a deep breath, the anger I once felt replaced by something softer. An understanding that forgiveness wasn't about her but about freeing myself. "Sophie, I don't hate you," I said. "But I can't have you in my life right now. I need space to heal." She didn't argue, and when the call ended I felt a sense of peace. For the first time I was choosing myself and it felt liberating. Months later, as I sat in a cozy cafe, sipping on a steaming cup of tea, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. The woman staring back at me from the mirror today was no longer defined by betrayal or heartbreak. She was stronger, wiser, and finally her own person. For the first time in years I felt like I truly knew who I was. And it wasn't tied to anyone else. Life had taken on a new rhythm, one I had crafted for myself. I'd started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. My apartment now had vibrant splashes of color on every wall. Canvases that told stories of growth, pain, and healing. I even joined a local art class, where I met people who shared my passion and reminded me that there was joy in connection without expectation. Ethan and Sophie? They had faded into the background of my life. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their fling had fizzled out, as these things often do. It didn't matter anymore. They were chapters in my story, but not the defining ones. What surprised me most was how much I had learned about forgiveness. Not for them, but for myself. I forgave the version of me who ignored the red flags, who stayed quiet to keep the peace, and who doubted her own worth. That forgiveness became the foundation on which I rebuilt my life. One afternoon I stood in front of a new painting I had just finished. A self-portrait. But this time it wasn't just a face staring back at me. The brushstrokes captured more. Strength in the eyes, resilience in the posture, and a vibrancy that radiated from the colors. For the first time I saw myself as I truly was, not as someone else's reflection or shadow. As I stepped outside, the sun warmed my face and I smiled, knowing I had weathered the storm. The future stretched out before me, a blank canvas waiting for me to paint it however I chose. I didn't need Ethan's validation or Sophie's approval. I didn't need anyone to tell me who I was. I was enough, just as I was. And that realization was more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. My husband cheated with the nanny and asked me to stay, a heartbreaking story of betrayal. It started with little things I would have dismissed had the unease not already been planted in my mind. One evening, while tidying up after the kids, I noticed Sarah's phone buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter. A glance at the screen showed a message preview from Alex. It was harmless on the surface. See you tomorrow at 10. Don't forget. But why was Alex texting Sarah about something I didn't know? I told myself it was nothing. Maybe they were discussing the kids or a schedule adjustment for Sarah's work. Still, the message lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. The next day, Alex left early for work and I couldn't help but watch his demeanor closely. He kissed me on the cheek, told the kids to behave and walked out the door with his usual charm. But his eyes didn't quite meet mine, and there was a hurriedness in his goodbye that made my chest tighten. By late afternoon, Sarah had taken Emily and Noah to the park, leaving the house unusually quiet. I sat on the couch sipping coffee when I decided to tidy up the kitchen. As I was putting things away, I noticed Alex's tablet on the counter. It wasn't locked. I shouldn't have looked. I know that now. But curiosity, or perhaps something deeper, got the better of me. My hands trembled as I opened his messaging app. At first I saw nothing unusual. Most of his texts were work-related or brief exchanges with friends. But then I saw Sarah's name. My stomach dropped as I opened the thread. The messages were casual at first, like the kind of conversations anyone might have with a nanny. But as I scrolled further, the tone changed. There were jokes. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Messages sent late at night. A photo of Sarah holding Noah, captioned, "My favorite nanny and my favorite little guy." It wasn't the words themselves that hurt, but the familiarity, the closeness they conveyed. I felt like I couldn't breathe. That night I confronted Alex. I waited until the kids were in bed, my heart pounding as I sat across from him at the dining table. "Why are you texting Sarah so much?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. He looked surprised, caught off guard, but quickly recovered. "She's the nanny," he said, shrugging. "We have to coordinate things for the kids." "That's not what this feels like," I shot back. My voice cracked, betraying the storm of emotions I was holding back. His face hardened. "You're overreacting," he said dismissively. "You've been stressed lately. Maybe you should focus on yourself instead of making up stories." His words stung, but they didn't erase the doubts. I decided to let it go, at least for the moment. But the seed had been planted, and I couldn't stop myself from noticing every little interaction between him and Sarah. What happened next wasn't an accident. It was inevitable. The truth was waiting, and it wasn't going to stay hidden for much longer. The truth unraveled itself in the worst possible way. A week after my confrontation with Alex, I walked into the house after running errands and heard hushed voices coming from the living room. I froze in my tracks, straining to hear. It was Alex and Sarah, and they were arguing, though trying to keep their voices down. "You said she wouldn't find out," Sarah hissed. Her voice carried a mix of fear and frustration. "Keep your voice down," Alex snapped. "I'm handling it." The blood drained from my face. My stomach churned and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I should have stormed into the room, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like lead, my heart like a drum pounding in my ears. "I can't keep doing this," Sarah continued. "This isn't what I signed up for." "And what about me?" Alex shot back. "Do you think I wanted this mess?" I didn't hear the rest. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the bag of groceries I was holding. The sound was deafening in the silence that followed. The living room door opened and Alex appeared, his face pale as he saw me standing there. "Alex." My voice was barely a whisper. "What's going on?" Sarah appeared behind him, her eyes wide with guilt and fear. She didn't say a word, she didn't need to. The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. "Go upstairs, Sarah," Alex said sharply, his tone a mix of authority and panic. She hesitated, then rushed past me, avoiding my eyes as she disappeared down the hallway. Tell me the truth, Alex, I demanded, my voice trembling. Right now. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not what you think, he started, but I cut him off. Don't lie to me, I snapped, the anger boiling over. I've seen the messages. I've heard you just now. How long has this been going on? His shoulders sagged as the fight drained out of him. A few months, he admitted quietly. It was like the ground beneath me shifted and I was falling into an abyss. A mix of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak coursed through me. My chest felt heavy and tears blurred my vision. Why? I choked out. Why would you do this to us? I don't know, he said weakly. I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. I couldn't believe his words. Didn't plan for this? How could he justify tearing our family apart so casually? My mind raced with images of Sarah in my home, playing with my children, sitting at my dinner table, all while carrying on an affair with my husband. That night, after Alex fell into an uneasy silence and Sarah avoided me entirely, I locked myself in the bathroom and sobbed until I had no tears left. The pain was unbearable. My marriage, my family, everything I thought I knew, it was all falling apart. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what to do. The love I had for Alex was buried beneath the rubble of his betrayal. But what about my children? How could I possibly hold everything together for them when I was breaking into pieces myself? The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and an ache that felt like it had settled into my bones. I could hear the kids downstairs, their laughter filling the air as if nothing had happened. Alex must have been with them. He was good at pretending. I forced myself to get out of bed. As much as I wanted to hide, I knew I couldn't. I had to be there for Emily and Noah, even if I felt like my world was crumbling around me. But as soon as I walked into the kitchen, I was met with Alex's somber gaze. We need to talk, he said quietly, nodding toward the dining room. I glanced at the kids who were busy with their breakfast and followed him, my heart pounding. Part of me hoped he'd say something to fix this, to take away the unbearable pain I was carrying. Instead, his next words shattered me further. I think we should stay together, he began, his voice carefully measured. For the kids. I stared at him, unable to comprehend what he was saying. What? I finally managed to choke out. For Emily and Noah, he continued, his eyes searching mine. They need us, both of us. They need stability. Stability? I repeated, my voice rising. You think this is stability? You think staying in a broken marriage is what's best for them? Listen to me, he said, holding up his hands in a placating gesture. I know I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But this doesn't have to destroy our family. We can get through this if we just work together. We can do it for the kids. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and unfamiliar. Do it for the kids. Is that your solution? Stay married to the man who betrayed me so I can pretend everything is fine? They're too young to understand what's happening, he argued, his voice tightening. If we split up, it'll hurt them more than anything I've done. Think about them, not just yourself. His words hit me like a slap. Was he seriously accusing me of being selfish? Of not putting my children first? And what about Sarah? I demanded, the name tasting like poison in my mouth. Are you suggesting she stays too? Part of this happy little charade you're proposing? She's leaving, he said quickly, as if that made everything better. She's already agreed to go. It's over between us. It was a mistake and I... You keep calling it a mistake, I interrupted, my voice trembling with rage. But mistakes don't last for months. Mistakes don't involve deceit and betrayal. Alex had no response to that. He simply looked at me, his face a mixture of guilt and desperation. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice breaking. Pretend like everything is fine when it's not. I'm not sure I can forgive you, Alex. Not for this. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the wound too raw. Just think about it, he said softly. Think about the kids. That's all I'm asking. I nodded, but inside I felt torn. The thought of my children growing up in a broken home was unbearable. But so was the idea of staying with a man who had broken my heart into pieces. After Alex's request, I felt trapped in a web of impossible choices. Every day seemed like a battlefield between my heart and my mind, and the stakes were unbearably high. For Emily and Noah, I kept up the pretense of normalcy, smiling when I didn't feel like smiling, hugging them when all I wanted was to collapse into myself. At night, though, when the house fell silent, the weight of my decision crushed me. I replayed Alex's words over and over. Think about the kids. As much as I hated to admit it, he wasn't entirely wrong. Emily and Noah adored their father. They'd run to him when he came home, squealing with joy, and he'd scoop them up with a warmth that almost made me forget what he'd done. But then I'd remember Sarah. Her laughter echoing in the house, her easy camaraderie with Alex, the betrayal written all over her face that day in the living room. Could I really forgive him for bringing that kind of deceit into our home? Could I look at him every day without seeing the lies and betrayal staring back at me? I needed guidance, someone to talk to. My best friend Laura had always been my rock in difficult times. I called her one evening after the kids were asleep, my voice shaking as I recounted everything. "You can't stay with him, not like this," Laura said firmly. "I get that you're worried about the kids, but staying in a toxic situation isn't going to protect them. It'll hurt them in the long run." "I know," I whispered. "But how do I explain this to them? How do I break their hearts?" "They're resilient," she reassured me. "And you're strong enough to guide them through this. But you can't sacrifice yourself just to keep the illusion of a happy family. That's not fair to you or them." Her words stuck with me, but they didn't make the decision any easier. The next day I scheduled a therapy session. I needed an objective voice to help me sort through the chaos in my head. Sitting across from the therapist, I spilled everything. My anger, my sadness, my confusion. She listened without judgment, then asked, "What would staying mean for you beyond the kids? What would it mean for your self-respect, your peace of mind?" I didn't have an answer. She continued, "Children learn about love and relationships by watching their parents. If you stay, what are you teaching them about love? About forgiveness? About boundaries?" Those questions haunted me. I began to notice how much of myself I'd already lost. I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't eating properly, and I could barely look at Alex without feeling a storm of emotions. I loved my children more than anything, but I was starting to wonder if staying in this marriage would truly be for them, or if it was just a way to avoid making the hardest decision of my life. And so, I sat there night after night, weighing the unbearable pain of leaving against the unbearable pain of staying. The answer still eluded me, but one thing was becoming clear. I couldn't remain in this limbo forever. Days turned into weeks, and I remained stuck in the same agonizing cycle of indecision. I'd go through the motions of my day, preparing meals, playing with the kids, maintaining the illusion that everything was fine, while inside I felt like I was falling apart. Alex had stopped pressing me for an answer, but his silence only made the tension in the house worse. Then one evening, the turning point came in the form of an innocent question. I was tucking Emily into bed when she looked up at me with her big, curious eyes. "Mommy," she asked softly, "why are you so sad all the time?" Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I froze, my hand still resting on the corner of her blanket. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I managed to say, though my throat felt tight. "You don't smile as much anymore," she said, her little voice full of concern. "And you're always quiet when Daddy's around." I bit my lip to hold back the tears that were threatening to spill. Emily was only 6, but she was so perceptive, so intuitive. I realized then that no matter how hard I tried to hide my pain, it was affecting her, and probably Noah too. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "I'm okay, baby," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. "I'm just a little tired." She nodded, satisfied for the moment, but her question lingered long after I'd left her room. That night I couldn't sleep. Emily's words played over and over in my mind, and with them came a flood of memories. I thought about my parents who had stayed together despite their own struggles. I remembered the tension, the silent dinners, the way I'd always felt like I was walking on eggshells around them. As a child, I hadn't understood why, but now as an adult I could see it clearly. They had stayed for me and my siblings, and in doing so, they had taught us all the wrong things about love. I didn't want that for Emily and Noah. I didn't want them to grow up thinking that love meant sacrificing your happiness or tolerating betrayal. They deserved better, and so did I. The next morning, as I stood in the kitchen watching Alex pour himself a cup of coffee, I knew I had to take the first step. My voice shook as I said his name, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. "We need to talk," I said, and for the first time I felt a flicker of strength in my chest. He set the mug down, a wary expression crossing his face. "About what?" "About us," I said firmly. "About what happens next." For the first time since discovering the affair, I felt a sense of clarity. I still didn't know exactly how I was going to rebuild my life, but I knew I couldn't stay trapped in this limbo. It was time to make a decision, not just for my kids but for myself. Sitting across from Alex in the quiet of the kitchen, I felt a calmness I hadn't felt in weeks. My heart wasn't racing and my voice didn't shake as I said the words I had been terrified to speak aloud. I can't do this anymore, Alex. I can't pretend that everything is okay. It's not. And it won't ever be the same again. He stared at me, his face a mixture of shock and desperation. What are you saying? He asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. I'm saying that I'm leaving, I said firmly, each word steady. For the sake of my own sanity and for the kids. They deserve a mother who isn't weighed down by pain and anger every day. You're just going to give up? He asked, his voice rising. On everything we've built, on our family? I took a deep breath, holding his gaze. You gave up on us the moment you chose to betray me, I said. I stayed because I thought I was doing the right thing for Emily and Noah. But staying in this marriage will only teach them to accept unhappiness, and I refuse to do that. Alex slumped back in his chair, rubbing his temples. What about the kids? Do you even know what this will do to them? I've thought about nothing else, I replied. And I know this won't be easy for them. But staying in a broken marriage isn't the solution. They'll see us unhappy. They'll feel the tension no matter how much we try to hide it. I won't let them grow up thinking this is what love looks like. For a moment he didn't say anything. The silence stretched between us, heavy and final. When are you planning to tell them? He asked eventually, his voice subdued. Soon, I said. But not until I've figured out the next steps. I'll stay here for now, just until I find a place to move to. I want to make this transition as gentle as possible for them. He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. I could see the regret in his eyes, but it was too late for apologies now. Over the next few weeks I began to prepare for the separation. I met with a lawyer, worked out a co-parenting plan, and found a small house not too far from where we lived. I wanted to keep things as stable as possible for the kids, even as everything around them changed. When the time came to tell Emily and Noah, it was one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. I sat them down, my heart aching as I explained that Mommy and Daddy wouldn't be living together anymore, but that we both loved them more than anything in the world. Emily cried, and Noah didn't fully understand, but I reassured them that they would always have a home with both of us. As painful as it was, I felt a sense of relief after that conversation. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of my life again. I wasn't just surviving, I was moving forward. Leaving Alex wasn't the end I had imagined for our family, but it was a new beginning. It was a chance for me to rebuild, to find myself again, and to show my children what it truly means to be strong.